In this video, I'll show you how to build a beginner/intermediate React project. Specifically, we'll work on a trivia game. I'll give you a demo in just a second, but this project is great for anyone just getting started with React, looking really to improve their skills, get more comfortable with the framework, and learn about some best practices like how to structure a slightly larger project, how to pick the different components you're going to have, and how to control components and pass data down throughout them. I'm going to show you a ton of stuff here and teach you a lot about React. With that said, let's get into a quick demo and then we'll start building this project. So I have a demo of the project running in front of me. Now this is a simple trivia game. You can have as many questions as you'd like, but for this short demo, I've just gone with 2. Now we'll keep track of the number of correct and incorrect questions and give feedback to the user when they get one correct or incorrect. So here you can see the first question is, what is Tim's middle name? In this case, my name is John. So I'll go ahead and select that and then I can click next. Now it says, what is Tim's favorite food? I'll go with the incorrect answer here, which is wings. You see that is wrong, and it shows me the correct answer here, which is steak. Now, when I click next, it tells you I score, and I have the option to play again. Now, I know that this seems relatively simple. It feels like this should be able to be created in a few minutes, but this is actually a really good project to demonstrate how you structure the different components involved in this and how you can flow through different states, pages, show the correct answer, incorrect answer. There's actually a lot here, so just trust me, you're going to get a ton of value from this project. Now, as well as just teaching you React, I'm going to show you a little bit of TypeScript. Don't worry if you've never used it before. I'll assume that you have no idea what it is, and you'll see how simple it can be to actually implement this in your project and how helpful it will be when your project starts to get a little bit larger. So let me pop over to my IDE and we'll start getting this project set up. So we're going to get into the setup and start writing some code, but I need to mention that in this video, I'm going to be using a free tool called Codux. Now, this is actually a visual IDE for React that works in companionship with VS Code or whatever other editor you want to use. Now, what that means is that we're still going to write this React application exactly as you normally would, but we'll just have some more powerful ability to view exactly what's going on in our individual components and to edit them, create layouts, add styles, and do some of the more difficult things when you're just looking at the code rather than looking at the entire component tree or hierarchy. So for example, you can see that I actually have the app open that I built beforehand. Obviously, I built this first just to make sure the concept was good. And you can see I'm kind of inside of a Statbar component. We'll walk through this later on, but inside of the Statbar component on the left-hand side, I can see all of the different elements that I have, which allows me to very easily find an area that I need to add a style to or fix or move around. And if I click on one, like the Statbar container here, I can go and actually add styles to it directly from this editor. So that means for any of you that hate CSS, just like I do, you don't actually need to write the CSS manually. You can do it in this cool editor while still writing all of the bulk of your code in an IDE. And what will happen is when you make a change here in Codux, it will directly change that inside of your IDE. It will actually add or remove or modify the appropriate lines of code. So you're not doing this weird syncing process where you have to write your code in a special way and you're exporting and importing and all the stuff you've probably seen in tools that look similar to this, So what we need to start by doing here is just downloading Codux. Again, it's free. You can do that from the link in the description. And I'm going to initialize the project from Codux so it sets up the necessary dependencies, and then we'll start actually writing code and creating our components. So what I did is just close the Codux app and reopen it just so I get a fresh screen here. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on New Project. Now, once I go to New Project, I'm going to select on Vite or Vite. Now, you might not have seen this before if you're a complete beginner, but this is kind of the new version of Create React app where you're using this as like the template of your project or like the boilerplate. Now, for the app, I'm going to go with React Trivia and we'll go with tutorial like that. And I will just save this on my desktop. Now, this is going to set us up with SCSS, CSS modules, and Vite. Again, we'll discuss this in a second once it loads. All right, so it's created that template for us now. This is like the exact same thing as running a terminal command that would have done that for us as well. It's just happening now in Codux. And you can see it's prompting me to actually install all of the modules that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Run. Now, this is just installing the node modules pretty much. I'm going to go ahead and click Close. And now we get the app loaded here in Codux. And you'll see in a second, it will actually render for us the preview of the template. So this is the template it gives us where we can actually, I think we can press on one of these buttons or something and it will count up. Anyways, hopefully you got the idea. But now what we'll do is we'll open the project in our editor or in our IDE. So just like before, nothing's changed. I'm going to open this up in VS Code. Now, when I did that in Codux, it created this on my desktop. For you, it may have created it somewhere else. So find the file location where this was created, open up the project in your editor, and now we are good to go. So what I can do is open up source here, and I'll just kind of go through some of the things that are set up for us because you may not have seen this type of template before. Then we'll start writing some code. So first of all, this project is using TypeScript. Now we don't need to use TypeScript, but in this project, it's going to be helpful just to have a few very simple types. So if you've never used it before, don't worry, you're going to learn a bit about it in this video. Anyways, that's why we have these TSX files. These are similar to JSX files, but TSX is the TypeScript, okay? So it's like the TypeScript equivalent. Inside of here, you'll see a few things are slightly different just because we're using TypeScript. And we have a few imports, for example, importing like an app module.scss. Now, if you've never seen this before, this is a special type of CSS file that allows us to do things like define variables, inherit classes, and just some more advanced CSS properties. We won't really use many of those in this video, but it's nice to be familiar with these types of files and how you import them, utilize them, etc. So we have, say, index.css, that's just a normal CSS file, but then we have an app.module.scss file, which has all of the styles directly for the app component. So we'll create a new one of these CSS files for each one of our individual components. Now, what I like to start by doing is just cleaning everything up a little bit. So I'm actually going to delete everything inside of here. I'm going to go to index.css, same thing. I'm going to delete everything inside of there. I'm going to go to main.tsx. We can keep all of this. This is what's going to be the entry point of our application. I'm then going to go to app.tsx, and I'm going to delete everything except one of the divs that's inside of here. Now that's going to have a bunch of kind of unused imports now. So I'm going to get rid of all of those. I will get rid of this state, which means I can get rid of this as well. And I'm going to remove the class name reference here from styles, but we will use styles later on. So now we should just have an empty application. And if we want to verify that, I can go back to Codux here and open that up. And you can see inside of the app, it's completely empty. Now, what we're going to be doing is just writing some new components and kind of creating a bit of structure here. And then I'll show you step by step how we view exactly what we're doing in Codux. Now, we also can just run this from a dev server. So that means I can go here and I can type npm run dev in my terminal, and this will just run the dev server for me, where now I can view this from my browser. Now we can view this from the browser like we normally would, but in Codux, we're going to get a bit more power, right? With the ability to actually edit and view right into the tree in the hierarchy, which will be a little bit more useful. So I'm going to close this for now because we don't really need that this second. All right, so now that we've got our setup done and we're kind of in the app here, we can start writing some code. So I want to begin by breaking down what it is exactly we need to do and how we're going to accomplish that. So we're creating a trivia game, right? And for that trivia game, you saw that we're going to have a few different components. We're going to have multiple questions, and we're going to progress through the different questions and just allow the user to answer them, right? Pretty straightforward. We're going to keep track of their score at the end. So the first thing we need to consider is, where are we going to store our questions and how are we going to load those? Now, I want to do this in a JSON file. That means that we'll have an individual file that will load all of the questions from, and that way we can add more questions quite easily. We could download sets of questions. We can make this quite flexible. So I'm going to begin by making a JSON file. Now, after we make a JSON file, what we'll need to do is load in those questions. We can randomize them or shuffle if we want to do that. Then we need to display them to the screen. Now, when we're displaying them to the screen, we want to keep track of what question we're on, how many we got correct, and how many we got incorrect. So that's going to involve having that kind of Statbar component there, so we can build that out. Then we're going to have an individual question. Now, each question could be represented as a component. Then within the question, we'll have the question itself, and we'll have the possible answers. Each one of those answers logically makes sense to be a component as well. So we'll go through this step by step as we actually build the code, but I want you to think to yourself, if you were making this from scratch, how would you figure out what components you're using? And what you want to consider is, what is going to be reused? What am I rendering multiple times to the screen? And what makes sense to be its own kind of isolated and discrete object, or in this case, component. Now, it's relatively simple for this project. You'll see how I structure this and how we build it out and make everything nice and simple and easy to read each step of the way. So let's start with that JSON file. We're going to go inside of source here, and we're going to make a new file called questions.json. Now, JSON is JavaScript object notation, so what we can write in here looks pretty much like a JavaScript object. So we're going to write a set of curly braces. we're going to do a key here. Now the key is going to be questions, colon, and then I'm going to put an array. Now inside the array, we're going to have objects that represent each question. So we're going to make an object here. And for each question, we need to think, okay, what makes up a question? Well, we have the actual question itself, or like the text or the content. We then have the possible answers. In our case, we'll go with 4, but it could be more if we want to. And then we'll have what the correct answer is. So we're going to say question as a key is equal to a string, and then we'll put the question. Now you can make this whatever question you want. In my case, I'll just go with what is my name? Okay. Then we're going to have the answers like that. This is going to be an array. And inside here, we're going to put the potential answers. Now we'll have Tim, that'll be the correct answer. We'll have John. We'll have Susan. We'll have maybe Bert. And then we're going to go with correct answer IDX, which stands for index. And I'm going to make this equal to 0. Now what I'm saying there is that the index of the correct answer is 0, meaning the first option I have in my answers array. If I did correct answer index as 1, that would indicate that John is the correct answer. So I'm just specifying which of the potential answers here is actually correct. And rather than answers, we could actually go with choices. That might make a bit more sense. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and paste. And I'm going to say, what is my last name? And then we'll change this. So that is actually my last name. We can go with, I don't know, what's a good last name? Like Smith. Anne, and I don't know, Jose. I know those aren't really last names, but that's fine. We'll just put those there. Okay, so now we have 2 questions. We can add some more later on, but for now, this is fine for doing the test. So what we want to do now is we want to actually be able to load those questions into our app. And for now, what we could do is just maybe log some of them or just see or like display like a simple question on the screen, okay? So to actually take this questions.json and import this inside of the app, we're going to do the following. We're going to say import, and I'm going to go with questions from, and then we're just going to say questions.json. And we actually need to put a / here indicating a relative path, meaning from this directory, load questions.json. So now we're actually going to have that JSON object here. The issue is we don't really know what's inside of it when we're kind of hovering over top of it, right? So you can see like I'm hovering questions and I don't know what keys I have in there, what values I have. It's going to be difficult to work with. So this is where something like TypeScript comes in. And what I can actually do is create a type of my JSON file, and I can type this kind of variable. You'll see in a second how that works. And that now allows me to actually get auto completions for this value. So what I can do is go to source and create a new file here called types.ts. Okay, so types.typescript is the extension. Now I'm going to define a few TypeScript types and I'll explain how they work, and then we'll use them to type that JSON file so that we understand what data we're actually working with. So we're going to create a type. We're going to say export type, and then we're going to give this a name. What do I want to call this? I'm going to call this questions, and this is going to be equal to a set of curly braces. Now inside of here, what I'm going to do is define the keys or define the values or what's actually inside of my object. So if I go look at questions, we have an object and we have one key here called questions, which is equal to an array of questions. Okay. So what I would write here is the following. I would say questions, which is the name of my key, colon, and then I'm going to do an array. And this is going to be an array of questions. Now the questions themselves are their own type, right? A question has a question, the choices, and the correct answer index. So I'm going to create a type for that as well. I'm going to say export type question, an individual question, right? And inside of here, we're going to say question colon string. That means that we have a question key, which has the value of type string. We then have our choices, and this is an array of what? An array of strings. So we're going to say string and then a set of square brackets. And then we have the correct answer index, which is a number. So what I've done is again defined all of the keys and all of their corresponding values for this type. Now what I can do is take this array here and I can say question and then put an array sign. So that now means for questions, I have an array of types or of objects that conform to the type question, meaning they each have a question, choices, and correct answer index field. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's your 1-minute TypeScript lesson. Okay, so if I go back to app now, what I can actually do is make a variable, and I can say const all questions, is equal to questions as, and then I can actually put the type that we just wrote, which is questions. Now notice if I hover over questions here, it's actually inferring that we need to, what do you call this? Import this from /types. So it's going to automatically import that for me. Otherwise, you could just write import, set of curly braces, questions, set of curly braces. There you go. You now have this in here. So now if I hover over all questions, you see it as the type questions, and it will actually give me auto completion and allow me to use this more easily throughout my program. So now that we have our questions loaded in, what we need to keep track of from this main app component is what question we're currently on, how many we've got correct, and how many we've gotten incorrect. Now to do that, we're going to use state. Now state is a piece of the React component that can change, and anytime the state changes, it will automatically re-render the component for us. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with that, as you probably have some experience with React if you're watching this video. But what I will do is go to the top of my program here, and I'll say import use state from React. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is set up a few different pieces of state that we're going to need, and we're going to use that in a second. So I'm going to say const, and inside of a set of square brackets, I'm going to say current question IDX. Okay. And then set current question IDX is equal to use state. And we're going to put a 0 here. Now, really what we're doing here is just keeping track of the index of the current question that we're on. When we have 0, that means we're on the first question. 1, we're on the second question, and we'll advance this to move to the next question. Next, we're going to have const, and we're going to say correct answers, and then set correct answers like that is equal to use state. And for now, this will be 0. And then we can copy this, and we'll just do the same thing for the incorrect. So we'll just change that to in, and then set incorrect answers like that. Okay, so now we have the 3 pieces of state that we need. Now what I want to do is set up the stat bar. Now the stat bar is going to tell us what question we're on and how many correct and incorrect answers we have. And we'll pass to that stat bar these pieces of state. So to create the stat bar, we're actually going to go in our source folder here. We're going to make a new folder, and we're going to call this components. Now it's just nice to organize our components that aren't the main kind of root component like the app one is inside of a folder. Now what I'm going to do is actually just delete this assets folder because we don't need that anymore. So let's get rid of that. And then inside of components, I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call this my statbar.tsx. Okay. Now we're going to define the statbar component. So we're going to say function statbar like that. And this is equal to a function. And this is going to return, for right now, simply a div. Now, what I like to start with when I write my functions, and actually, let me just go down here and say export default statbar. If you're unfamiliar with that, this is making it so statbar is available outside of this individual TypeScript file. But inside of here, what I want to start by doing is defining the props that we need to pass to this component. Now, the props are pretty much the variables or the input to the component, right? So in this case, we want the kind of current question. So yeah, we want like what question we're on. We need the total number of questions, and then the correct and the incorrect questions. So what I'm going to do is define a type here in TypeScript, and I'm going to say type props is equal to this. And I'm going to say current question, and this is going to be a number. I'm going to say total questions, and this is going to be a number. I'm going to say correct, this will be a number, and then I'm going to say incorrect, and this will be a number, okay? And then I'm going to go to statbar here, and I'm going to say props, colon, and then props like that, which now means I can access all 3 of these values from this props variable. Now, what we'll do, actually, I don't think I need to do anything at the top here, is inside the div, we'll just render inside of paragraph tags the 3 pieces of information that we want. And then I'll actually show you how inside of Codux, we can go and create the correct styling for this. So I'm going to go inside of paragraph tag 1, and I'm going to put kind of some JSX syntax here, where I say question, colon, then this is going to be the current question. So props.current question, and then divided by or out of, and then I'm going to do another set of braces here, and then props.total questions. So what I'm kind of displaying here is, okay, you're on question 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 4, or whatever, right? So I'm taking the data passed in here and displaying that. Now down here, I'm going to say correct, colon, and then this is going to be props.correct. And then we're going to do the same down here for incorrect. Okay, incorrect, props.incorrect. Okay, so now we have a stat bar. Now what I can do is go to my app and I can render my stat bar inside of here. So I'm just going to say stat bar like that. Notice it's going to automatically import that for me. And then I can go and write the props. Now the props for this are the following. And if we don't know what they are, we can actually hover over top of this and it will tell us what we're missing because we're using TypeScript. So I'm going to say the current question is equal to, and this is going to be the current, if we can get out of this, question index plus 1. The reason I'm adding 1 is I want to be displaying question 1 when we're on the 0th index, which is the first question. So we have 0 indexing here. So we just have to add 1 to that so we get the correct representation of the question. Then we're going to say the total questions is equal to, and this is going to be all questions dot questions, because remember that this type here has the field questions, which is an array. So we're accessing questions, getting the length of that array, and that's the total number of questions that we have. So go back here. Okay, so that's total questions, and this is going to be dot length. We are then going to say correct is equal to the correct answers, and incorrect is equal to the incorrect answers. Okay, so that is our stat bar. Now, if we want to view the stat bar, we can go here to Codux. Let's just reload this here. Okay, and you can actually see that we're getting this information showing up on the screen. So it says questions, correct, and incorrect. Now, one cool thing in Codux is that we can view all the individual components that we have so that we can directly edit them. So if I go down here, it says scan for components. Now, if I press that, it's going to scan the app and it will actually find that we have this stat bar component. Now, what I can do is create something known as a board. Now, a board is a place that I can test the component and view different values and see how it responds and just kind of, mess with the component in a sense. So if I create a new board here, I can call this whatever I want. In this case, we'll just call it stat bar. You'll see that now it will actually give us our component in isolation. So notice how we don't have any values being passed to it like we did when we have the app, because now we're just viewing this component in isolation. So if I want, I can zoom in here. So let me make this 200% just so it's a little bit larger. And if I actually bring up from the bottom of the screen here, you can see that we have code and we have statbar.board.tsx. Now this is a Codux file, and notice it's rendering the stat bar here without any props. Now what I can do is I can pass the props that I want to test and view inside of this board. Now that's not going to affect my source code. It's not going to change anything inside of there, but it's going to give me a place where I can view certain states or kind of properties or variants of my component. I'm hoping that makes a bit of sense. But if I go to stat bar here and I go to, and I add a prop, sorry. So what are the props that we had for stat bar? We had total questions. So I can say total questions is equal to, let's put this inside of there, 1. Let's say the current question is equal to 2. And notice this kind of updates in live time. Now that doesn't make sense because it's more questions, or the current question is greater than the number of questions we have. But then I can say correct is equal to 1 and incorrect is equal to 0. Okay, so now we get a version of this. Now what I want to do is I want to style this and get this in the correct layout. So what I can do is select on this. It's going to show my properties, but I can go here to the style tab and I can actually add styles and selectors to this. Now it's not happening from the board here. I have to go and click on edit component. When I do that, now it gives me the actual source code for this component. So now I'm not editing the board, which is where we kind of mess around with it. I'm editing the actual code. So here, if I click on this div, right, I can go to where it says selectors. I can add a style. So I'm just going to make a new class here that I want to apply to this. I'm going to call this the stat container. Okay, if we can type that correctly. And I'm going to click on create class. Now, when I do that with stat container, it's going to tell me where it's creating it. In this case, statbar.module.scss. This is a new file it will create for me automatically. I'm going to go ahead and press create. And now we have this class that you can see has automatically been applied to our, container. And if I go here, notice inside of Statbar that it's actually changed inside of VS Code. Okay, so let's go back to Codux. And now let's start styling this component. So first of all, I want to have this in a horizontal layout, which means I need my flex to be in the row direction. So how do I do that? I got to see all the little buttons that we have here. We have block, inline, flex. So I'm going to press on flex here for the layout. That's going to give me a flex row. Now you can choose the direction. I'm going to keep this as horizontal, and we have options like wrapping, aligning, etc. So what I would like to do is I would like to add some gap between my different components here. So I can add a gap, say, of 10 pixels. And now they're a little bit more spaced out. Now, what I also want to do is I want to create kind of a container around this with some padding and a background color. So I got to find where this is. There's some padding. So I'm going to go to padding and I'm going to add 10 pixels there. Okay, so it's getting a little bit larger. We can manually adjust the size if we want to do that. And we can go to things like border, corners, background. That's what I want. So for background, I'm going to select kind of like a dark gray here, maybe a little bit lighter. What do we actually want? Let's go with like a dark gray. And then we can go to the text color. So I got to find where that is. Here you go. Font. Okay. Select the color and we'll go with white. Okay. So let's make that more white. And if we want, we can change the font family. Let's see how that looks. Okay. I actually kind of like that. That's nice. And if we want, we can add some borders. So if I want to do corners, I can say, what is this? Like 10 pixels. And now this will actually add rounded corners. We can't see it the way that we have it displayed right now, but we will see that when we have it rendered in the larger app. Okay, so you can see that I just styled all of that without actually having to use regular CSS. I can just press all the buttons on the side, which for me is like the most valuable part of this tool. Now, if I go back to home here and we go to app, this should update in a second. You can see this is updated and that's displayed. Now, I'm not sure if the rounded corners are working. I might just be using the wrong properties, but we can do this manually if we want. So if we go to statbar.module.css, yeah, the border radius 1 pixel. Oh, it's because I didn't add 10. Okay, so that's why. So border radius 10 pixels, and that should make it a little bit larger for me. Okay, so there you go. That is our stat bar. Now that we have the stat bar, we want to start displaying our questions. So we're going to create a new component for the questions. Let's go ahead and do that. So new component here and call this question.tsx. Now let's make another function and we'll call this question. Okay. And we're going to say export default question. All right. And actually, I'm going to call this question comp. The reason for that is we have a type called question, and it's going to mess up a little bit if we have question and question as like duplicated names, right? So I'm just going to name this question comp for component. I'm going to say type props is equal to, and then we'll create the props for our question. All right, so for our question, we need to know, first of all, what the actual question is. So I'm going to go here and say question : question, and I'm going to import that from my types because we're going to pass an individual question which contains the question, the choices, and the correct answer index. Now, what we're also going to need here is a function to call to indicate to the app when we've advanced to the next question and if we got the question correct or incorrect. You'll see what I mean here in a second, but I'm going to say should we go on press? I'm going to say on submit. Okay, and this is going to be a function that is parentheses, and then this is going to be equal sign, and then what do you call this here? The greater than sign, and then void. This is the type signature for just a function that doesn't return any value. And we're going to take in a parameter here called correct, which is a Boolean. So what I just did is type here the parameter of my function if you haven't seen this in TypeScript. And I'm saying, okay, we're going to pass a function to onSubmit as a prop. And we're going to call this function when we submit the question so that the main app knows to advance us to the next question and to tell us if we got it correct or incorrect. You'll see how this works in just a second. Now I'm going to go to here and I'm going to say props like that. And we're going to start writing the JSX for our question and styling it. So what I'm going to do here is simply return a div. Inside of the div, I'm going to have an h3 tag, and I'm just going to render what the question is. So I'm going to say props.question.question. And then we're actually going to render here another component, which is going to be the answers. Now, we haven't written this component yet, but the reason I'm writing this is we're going to handle all of those different answers from that component, not from the question component directly. So now I'm going to make another component, and I'm going to call this answers.tsx. Okay, and we're going to say function answers like that. Okay, we're going to export this. So export default answers. We're going to create our props. So we're going to say type props is equal to this. Now for the props, just to make it simple, we can actually just take the question directly. So we can say question and then question like that. And then we also need to have an on submit like that. And this is going to be the same function we're going to say correct Boolean colon equal void like that, because this is where we'll actually handle the logic for indicating whether we got a question correct or incorrect. There's a few other ways we could set this up, but I want to show you how we can pass data down from multiple components, and you'll see what I mean as we start going. So let's say props like this, props. Okay, now inside of here, what do we need to do? Well, we need to return some information about our answers. So we're going to say return div, and we're going to loop through all of the potential answers we have. We're going to display those, and then we're going to set up some kind of on presses. So like when you actually press on the answer, it will call this function, and it will either have correct or incorrect depending on the answer you selected. So what we'll do here is we'll actually set up a map, and we will say props.question.choices.map. Now map is going to iterate over all of our choices. For map, I'm going to take in my choice and the index of that choice, because having the index will allow us to know if the choice is correct or not. And we're going to say colon equal to, and then we're going to return actually an answer component. This will be another component that we're going to make. So let's make that component. I know we have a few here, but we'll go through them in a second. So we're going to say answer.tsx. Now we're going to make the answer component, and we almost have all the components now that this is done. So we're going to say function answer like that. Now we're going to say export default answer. Okay. From answer, we got to define our props. So we're going to say type props like that. Now for this, we are going to have an on press. Okay. And this doesn't actually need to take anything. It can just be a void. So this is just the function we're going to call when we press this answer, because this will be a button that we can select. We then are going to have another value here, which is going to be the text. So this should just be the text that we're going to be displaying. And then lastly, we're also going to have the color, and this is going to be question mark equal to a string. Now, when you put a question mark here in TypeScript, that means this is optional. Now, the reason I'm passing color is we need to know if we should be displaying this as like a normal kind of white text where we haven't pressed anything yet, or red or green, depending on if we've answered this correctly or incorrectly, right? So like if I answer, we're going to display what the correct answer is in green and the incorrect answer is in red. So we need to know that in this answer component. So we're going to go here and say props like that. And we are going to return our answer. So we're going to say return like this. And I think all we actually need here is a button. So we'll say button. And then inside the button, we will have the text of props.text. And we'll simply have the on click equal to the props.onPress. And that means when we press the button, it will press this function or call that function, and then we'll adjust the color in just 1 second. In fact, what we can do for the color is we can say style is equal to, and then I'm going to put a set of kind of empty braces here, and I'm going to say color question mark. So actually this is props.color question mark. And then we're going to go inside of here. And we're going to say color colon props.color. Else, we're just going to have an empty object. Now, it might be a little bit clearer if I put this in a variable. So let's just say const style is equal to this. And then we'll replace this with the style variable. Now, what I'm doing is writing a ternary if statement. What that means is if we have a color provided to us, so if you actually pass some string value here, then we are going to create an object that has color colon props.color, which is a style attribute we're going to apply to this button. Otherwise, we're just going to have nothing for the style, meaning we're not going to make any changes at all. Now, while I'm at it, I'm actually thinking that I need to change this slightly. I'm going to take style equals style here. And I'm actually going to write a span and apply this to the span tag. The reason I need to do this is I just want the color to affect the text. I don't want it to affect the color of the button. So I need to just wrap the text directly, which is inside of the button. Now I'm also going to add one more prop here that I forgot about, which is disabled. We should spell that correctly, because once we have answered the question, we don't want to be able to press the button again. So we're going to say disabled question mark colon, and then this is going to be a Boolean. And I'm going to go here to my button. I'm going to say disabled question mark, or not question mark, sorry, is equal to props.disabled. Okay. So now we have our answer component. This one is actually finished. And if we want to view the answer component, we can go to Codux and just quickly have a look at it. So let's just reload this just because we had some imports that weren't working. Let's rescan our components here. You should see now that we get answer, answers, etc. If we go to answer, we can create a board. So let's make a board and call this answer red. Okay, now let's zoom in on this a little bit. All right, here we go. This is our answer. Notice we have some values we can pass in here. So for the text, I'm just going to go with Timothy, which is actually my full name. For the color, we'll go with red. Notice that now creates red. And then if we made it disabled, it would actually disable the button so we can't press on it. Okay, so that's one instance of the button that we can have a look at here. Now, if we wanted to, we could create another board for this button. So I say new board and then answer green, for example. And now I can do the same thing. So zoom in, select my button. If I can scroll over here. Okay, so select that, text, Timothy, spelled correctly, and the color of green. Now, again, that doesn't actually affect my component in the code. It just gives me a way to be able to view the different states of my button. Okay, so now that we have that, we can do a little bit of styling and we can actually display those answers. So if we go to answers here, we have this answer component and you can see that we need to take in the text and a few other things. So first of all, let's import this. So I can go here and import this from ./answer. Now we're going to say the text is equal to the choice actually just the choice, sorry, that's all that needs to be. Then we're going to say the onPress is equal to, and this is going to be a function that we're going to write. Now, this is going to be a little bit more complex logic here, but notice what I just did is I changed this. So now we have these curly braces inside of this map, and I'm just going to explicitly return answer now. Before it was implied that it was returned because I didn't have the braces, I just had parentheses. Now, since I have parentheses, this is essentially acting as an inline function. Anyways, for this function, I'm going to write the onPress function that we're going to call when we press on this answer. Now, what's going to happen is whenever we press on the answer, we need to take that data and pass that up, right? We need to give that to the parent component so it knows if we got it correct or if we got it incorrect, right? So we have answers, but then from answers, we have question, and then from question, we have the app component. Now, all of these components need to pass the data up. The way we do that is with something known as function callbacks, which is what I'm using here in the props. I'm hoping that makes sense, but what I'll do here on the onPress is I will call this function. That function will then be kind of represented here inside of the question, and then we'll use that to then call the app here and tell us if we got it correct, incorrect, etc. Okay, so what does this need to do? Well, first of all, when we press on an answer, we need to make it so that we can't press on any other answers. Now that means that we need to have a piece of state that tells us whether or not we've already selected an answer. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say import use state from React. Okay. And I'm going to make a piece of state here that essentially tells me if we've already answered the question or not. Now the way I can do that is I can just say const, and we can go with something like show answer set show answer is equal to use state, and we're going to go with false. So now I'm going to write the onPress function. So I'm going to say const onPress is equal to an arrow function. This arrow function is going to take an index, which is a number. And we're going to do this. We're going to say set show answer equal to true, because as soon as you press on any of the answers, we want to display what the correct answer actually is. And then we're going to say the following. We're going to say props.onSubmit. But then what we need to do is we need to indicate whether or not we got this question correct. Now, we only got it correct if the index of the answer we pressed on is the same index as the, the correct answer from our question. Okay, so we're going to say if the props.question.correct answer index is equal to this index, then we got it correct. Otherwise, it's not correct. So this condition will be true or false, which will then tell the question that we answered this correctly or we answered it incorrectly. Hoping that's making a bit of sense. But what we'll do now is inside of the onPress, we're actually going to write a function. And this function is going to call the onPress function and pass the index. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, well, as soon as we press the answer, we want it to call some function this function is actually going to call the onPress function that we have written here, and it's going to pass the index of whatever the answer is that we clicked on. So that way we don't have to keep track of the index inside of the answer. We just have that inside of this, component. Okay, so that maps out all of our different questions. Now what we'll do to go a step further here is we'll say, okay, well, if we're displaying the answer, then we want to be telling the answer to show us red or green, right? If we're displaying it. So what we can do to do that is we can say let color equal an empty string. Okay, we then can write an if statement, and we can say if show answer, and actually we can do it like this. We can say if show answer and props dot question dot correct answer index is equal to the index. Then we're going to say the color is equal to green. Okay. Now, otherwise, we'll say else if show answer like this, then the color is equal to red. Now, we'll keep going here in a second, but what I'm saying is, okay, if we're showing the answer, right, and the answer is correct, so the one that we're displaying here, if this is actually the correct answer, then we're going to set the color equal to green because it's right. Now, if we're showing the answer and this wasn't the case, so that was false, then we're going to make the color red. Hopefully that's clear. So here we can go and say color is equal to, and we can just pass color. And if none of these are true, the color will just be an empty string, so nothing will change. Now we also want to say disabled. Now disabled is going to be equal to show answer. So if we are showing the answer, we're going to disable the buttons so you can no longer press them. So actually, before we go back to Codux, I'm just going to go to app, and I'm just going to render my question component. So I'm going to say question comp like that, and I'm going to say the question is equal to, and this is going to be all questions dot questions at the current question index. And then we're going to say on submit is equal to, and this is just going to be an empty function for right now that we'll fill in later. So if I save that and I go back to Codux here, okay, you can see, let's close that and go to app. If we view app here, it's saying what is my name. Now, for some reason, it's not showing the answers, but this is actually where Codux can come in handy. If I click on this now and I start going into the tree, I can view all the different components that I have. So I'm inside of the question component. I have an expression, and I'm just seeing what is my name, which is telling me for some reason, it's not actually displaying that answers component. So let's go back to questions. And you can see that's because we don't have answers here. So that's why it's not showing up, because I didn't render it here. So let's render it here by doing answers like that. We can go ahead and import that from /answers. And if I hover on this, we need the question and the on submit. So we're going to say question is equal to props.question, and the on submit is going to be equal to the props.on submit like that. Okay, so now if we go back to Codux, we should see that we are getting the different options right here, and we're getting our 4 different buttons. Now we can test out their state in a second, but for now, let's go back here. Let's, I'm not sure why we're getting an error there. What's the log? Each child in the list should have a unique key property. Okay, so let's actually fix that first, sorry. So go here to answers. Now, whenever we have this map here, we have to add a key property to our different objects. So I'm just going to say key is equal to IDX, and that's going to fix that error that we were seeing. Go back to Codux here. Okay, now we're no longer getting that error. And what I want to do is I want to style my question component. So I can go here, go to my question component. We can view that inside of here, or we can view it directly inside of a board. I think viewing it in here is fine for right now. Let's go into answers, and let's style each individual answer, and then let's lay them out in a 2x2 layout. All right, so I'm going to start by actually styling the container. Now, the container is going to be this div that includes my different answers. Now, I want to make this a flexbox. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a style. The style I add will be choices like that. We'll create that inside of a new SCSS module. Okay, and let's make the layout. So let's select flex, horizontal. And how do we want to align items? We'll go center and then justify. And I want this to be, actually, is this correct here? So for align items, that's fine, center, place items, center, place content. I want to do that space between in this direction. So I'm going to click on that one, and now you can see it kind of aligns them space between. The issue is I actually want these to be in a 2x2 configuration. Now, I think the way I need to do that is by adding a flex wrap. I don't remember how to do that exactly here. All right, so actually it's right here, flex wrap. So I'm gonna click on wrap. Now, if I go into my individual answer, so I go to, say, the answer component right here, and I go to the button, I can now add a style on here and set a width, and then I should get that 2x2 configuration I'm looking for. So I'm gonna make a new class here, create class. I'm gonna call this answer. Okay. Now for this, we just want to set the width. So we're gonna go over to, where do we have width? Right here. And we're gonna go 45%. So I can go to pixel and just select percent there. And now notice it brings us in that 2x2 configuration with actually a 10%, what do you call this here? Kind of pad. If I want it to be a little bit less, I could do like 47.5%, and then that gets a little bit larger. Okay, so that's good for that sizing. Now let's actually just make the buttons look a little bit nicer. So let's add a bit of padding. So where's my padding? Padding is right here. Let's add 10 pixels of padding to our buttons. Let's add some background color. So background, I want that to be a similar gray color, which I think is going to be like this one here. Okay, that's better. I want to change my text. So let's go to text and color, and let's make that white. Okay, we can do that same font family, which is this one. Weight, we can actually make this bold. I think those look a little bit nicer. Let's add a border. So for the border, we'll go solid. Do I want it black? Let's go with a white pixel border like that. For the corners, let's go with 10 pixels of rounding. Okay. Now let's go back to our answers, which we can do right here. Let's go to our div and let's add a bit of gap. So in the column direction, I'm going to add 10 gap. That's a little bit nicer. I don't know if we need a background color for that. I think we can just add a background color to the whole screen. And now our buttons are looking a bit nicer. Now, if I want, I can click on one answer here. Let's edit this component. So let's go to the button and I can add actually states to this. So you see where it says states, I can click on element state. I'm going to go to focus and now I'm editing the focus state. So if I go to focus, I can actually just change the border color, which is what I'm going to do. So for the border, I'm going to change the color to be like a blue color, just so it's kind of clear that we're hovering on it. And then that should be good. Now, I think I can preview this and notice when I hover over it, or actually it's because it's in the focus state right now. Let's not active, just focus. Okay, I'm not sure exactly how to preview that state change. I might need to do it from a board, but I think you guys get the idea, right? When we hover on it now, since I just added that focus state, it should actually show us that kind of blue outline. All right, so last thing here, let's adjust this name. So if we go back here to the H3, you can see this text is a little wonky. So let's go H3. Let's go to style. Let's add a class here. Just call this question. Okay, create that. Now for question, we'll just go and change the font so that it matches the other one. And we'll make the color be white. Now you're not going to be able to read it right away, but we will set the background color of the entire screen in a second. So now we can go back to app. Okay, just go to the div and we'll change the background color now. So for the background color, we'll add a style, press on create class. Okay, go ahead and make that. Now we will change the background. So that is going to be here. Let's make this like, I don't know. I don't know what color we want this to be. Let's go with like a more gray, maybe. You guys can see I'm struggling here with selecting the colors. You guys can adjust this if you want, but you get the idea. That's what we'll go with for now. I want to add a bit of padding in here. So let's go to padding, 10 pixels. I did not mean to have a 1 pixel width. So let's just make that back to auto. And there you go. Now we have a nice little container and most of the styling is done. Okay. We're getting close to being finished here, guys. Let's close that. We do have some more logic to write though, before we can wrap this up. All right, so actually most of the stuff from our answers, questions, stat bar, those are done. A lot of the logic now is going to happen inside of apps. You can see that we're rendering the question component. And then inside of question, if I go here, we have the on submit, right? We're passing that to answers. From answers, we have this onPress call whenever we press one of the answers, which then calls the onSubmit, which then if we go back, calls this onSubmit, which then in turn will call whatever function we pass here to onSubmit. So that's what I want to write now, because what I want to do is once we submit, I want to update whether we got correct, incorrect, etc. And then I want to allow the user to advance to the next question. So that's going to involve displaying a button, and then that button will say, move to the next question. So what we'll have here is another piece of state. We're going to say const waiting to advance. We're going to say set waiting to advance is equal to use state. And this is going to be false. Now I'm going to have a const on submit. Okay, this is going to be equal to a function. And this is going to say correct. And this is going to be a Boolean. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to say if correct, then we're going to say set correct answers. And this is going to be the correct answers plus 1. Else, we're going to say set incorrect answers. And this is going to be the incorrect answers plus 1. We're then going to say set waiting to advance to be true. Okay, so that's going to put us in a mode where now we are, well, waiting to advance. All right, now that we are waiting to advance, what we need to do is have another button that we will display underneath here that says next. So I'm going to say here, if waiting to advance, so waiting to advance, and then we're just going to have a little button. So we're going to say button like that. And this is going to say next question, ... And on this button, we're going to have an on click is equal to, and we're going to call a function. Now the function we're going to have here is const advance. Okay. So we're going to call the advance function. So we'll just write advance like that. And now for the advance function, we're going to say set waiting to advance false, because now we're no longer waiting to advance because we're advancing. And we're going to increment the current question index. So we're going to say set current question index equal to the current question index plus 1. Now we do need to check to see if we are currently at the last question, but for now this should allow us to advance through the questions. So what we can do is just take this onSubmit function and pass that here. Okay. And now we should actually be able to run our app and see all of this working properly. Now this next button is going to look a little janky. We can style that in a second, but I just want to see if this is working. So let's go here and type npm run dev. That's going to run the development server for us. Let's open this up here in our browser. So let me pop that open. Wrong window. It is over here. You can see that it looks a little bit weird, so I got to fix this. Let me refresh this here. I messed something up with the states, but anyways, it says question 102, correct 0, incorrect 0. If I click on Tim, boom, it says 102, correct 1. Next question, brings me the next question. And then we got to fix this because it's still highlighting when it shouldn't be highlighting. Okay, so a few things to fix here, but you can see that this is kind of working. We can also adjust the width and the size of this if we wanted to do that. Okay, so we're back here inside of VS Code. First, let's fix that issue where it was still highlighting them when we move to the next question. The way we can do that is we can go to answers here and we can import a use effect. Now, what we need to do is just reset this state here. So show answer anytime we get another question. So this is actually really easy to do. We can just type use effect, pass a function, and then inside of this set of parentheses here, this is the dependency array. This means that use effect, this function is going to run anytime whatever we have inside of here changes. So we're just going to say props dot, and this is going to be question. So anytime we get a new question, we're going to say set show answer equal to false, and that will no longer show the answer for the next set of choices that we display. Okay, so that's that. So now if we go back to our dev server, so let's open this up here. You'll see that if we go, so Tim, next question, it gets reset. Okay, so that's working. We just need to fix our blue highlight. And then we need to have that kind of finished screen, because here, if I click next question, you'll see the app crashes. So we'll handle that in a second. Okay. All right, so let's open up Codux. Let's go here into one of our answers. We can go and press edit component. Now, when I click on this here, if I go to this, we'll go and look at our border. And yes, it looks like we have 1 pixel border in the non-hover state. So let me remove that. Let's go back here to states. Let's go hover. And now I need to actually press this button, which I forgot to do before. So I'm going to create that. Now you can see the selectors changed. So now if I scroll down, I can add a 1 pixel border, and that should be good. So if we go back here and we go back to this, when I hover it, you can see that we add that 1 pixel border. Now, if we don't want it to move around and kind of jump like this, the way we can fix that is we can go here. We can get out of the hover state. So just go to, how do I change this? Answer. And we can just add a 1 pixel border that is transparent or a different color. So if I add that, and how do I make this a different color? Let's make it just black. Okay, so now if we go back, you can see that we're not having it jump around because we're not changing the sizes. Okay, so last thing to do is handle what happens when we end. So let's write that. The way we're going to do that is we're just going to have a component that will kind of be like our reset component. So we can go to components and we can say reset.tsx with a capital R. We'll say function reset like that. Okay. We'll say export default reset, and we'll type our props. So let's say type props equal to this. We're going to say total questions number, and then correct questions like that is a number. We're going to take these in as props. So props like that. And we're just going to return a simple div that will display how we did. Now we also need to have a button. So we're going to say on press. Okay. And this will be a void. And this will just call a function that will reset the game for us. So we're going to have a div. On the div, we're going to have an on click. This is going to be the on press from our props. We're then going to display an h1 that says you scored, and we're going to take our props.correct questions and divide that by the props.total questions, put that inside of a set of parentheses, and then multiply that by 100, and then put a percent so that we get the percentage that we scored. We are then going to have a button, or actually, sorry, so the on click needs to be on the button, not the div, and the button will say press to try again. Okay, so that is our reset component, fairly straightforward. So what we'll kind of say here is if we have answered all of the questions already, we have none left, we're going to display that reset component. And then when we press that reset button function, it's actually going to reset the current question index to be back to 0 and reset all of the different props that we need. So what we can do here is say const, actually not const, we can just say if the current question index is greater than or equal to the allQuestions.questions.length, then we will simply return the reset component. Now, when we do this, we need to pass our values. So we're going to say total questions is equal to all questions.questions.length. And notice that I get all of that autocomplete because I'm using TypeScript. And then we're going to say the correct questions is equal to the correct answers. So I probably should have named them the same thing, but that's fine. And then we're going to say on press is equal to, and we're going to write a reset function. So we're going to say const reset is equal to this. And we'll just pass that reset function. And then inside of reset, we will reset all of our state. Okay. So we're going to say set the current question index back equal to 0. We're going to say set the correct answers equal to 0. We're going to say set the incorrect answers equal to 0. And I think that's actually all we need. If we reset those 3, we should be good. And just for good measure, we'll just say set waiting to advance equal to false as well, just to make sure that that is not messed up. Okay, let's give this a shot. We'll do some final styling after this, but if we refresh here, okay, let's answer Tim, next question. Smith, next question. You scored 50%. Press to try again. Go ahead and we can run that. Fantastic. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is just set a background color for the entire screen. I want to style that next button, and then I want to style that reset page, and then we'll be done. So to set the background color for the entire screen, I'm just going to go to my index.css, and I'm just going to say body, or actually I'm going to say HTML, comma body. So I'm going to do this for both of them. And I'm going to say the background color is equal to just a gray. Now, if I do that, let's go here. You can see we have two different colored grays. That's fine for now, but at least the whole thing is gray. Okay. Now for the rest of this, we can style it with Codux. So to do that, we can go over to our app, and you'll see that if I click into the app here, notice that in this board, we're not displaying the next button, right? Because we need a certain condition to be true to be able to display that. So if I go and view the code down here, right, app.tsx, you'll see that if I kind of expand this, we have this condition for the button, but we're not seeing it on the screen here because that condition is not true. So if I just want to edit the button right now, what I can do is go to waiting to advance, and I can just change this to say true and that. Now you'll see this next button appears, and now I can style this next button. So if I click into the next button here, which I'm on, I can go ahead to go to styles here. I can add a class. So we'll say add style, and we'll just call this, you know what, actually what we could do is we could just reuse the answer style. So if we do that, now it looks just like the answers, which I think is actually fine. But we will add another selector to this as well. So we'll just say add style. We'll actually create another class. We'll call this next-btn and create that. And then we'll just add a little bit of margin. So if I go here to margin, it's going to go like that. And sorry, I don't want these to be on all of them. So I'm going to unlock these. So 0, 0. I just want actually 10 pixels of left margin. So let's add that, or no, not left, top margin, so that we kind of get a bit of spacing here between the other, options. Okay, so I think that styled that. Now in the same light here, we have this reset component that we can't see. So if we want to view that, we could just have to do something like this, or true. And now it's going to show us the reset component, and then we can adjust this however we want. So for this button, this is the one that I actually wanted to change. So I'm going to click on the button, click button, and let's actually just style this just like the next button and just like our answer. Press to try again. The one thing we will do though is we will add a style. So let's go to call this, what do we want to call this? Reset btn. And create that class. Okay. And I just want to set the width. So for the width, we're going to change that to 100% because I don't want it to be small like the other ones. Okay. You scored 0%. We can adjust this text now if we want. So we can go to the H1, add a style, reset text. Okay. And if we go here to the font family, we can adjust that. And that is looking a little bit nicer. Sweet. So that's that. We can close out of that, close that for a second. I'm just going to go back to app.tsx here, and I'm just going to remove some of these adjustments that we did. So we'll go true and waiting to advance. Okay, very nice. And now finally we can rerun our dev server. I think it's still running. So yeah, let's open this up. Okay, and we can test this out. Tim, next question. Jose, next question. You scored 50%. Press to try again. If we want to put that in the middle of the screen, we can. But you can see that we have a fully implemented quiz. Very nice. Now, obviously, if you want to add more questions to the quiz, you can go here to questions.json and you can just add them in. So I think, guys, that is pretty much it. We can quickly run through the project just to make sure everyone's clear on the code. All of this will, of course, be available to download from the link in the description. So I'll skip the styles and we'll start with app. Inside of app, we have a few pieces of state, right? So current question index, correct answers, incorrect answers, waiting to advance. We also grab the questions from our JSON file. We then have some functions. On submit, this handles what happens when we actually answer a question. On advance, this is how we move to the next question. And then reset, this is going to reset the game so we can play again. We then have this case here, which is handling if we've ended the game. So if we've actually completed the quiz, we display that reset component. And then when we press that button, it actually resets and brings us back to the previous state. So this hopefully kind of shows you how you store the main parent state you need in the app component. And then you pass callback functions, which can adjust that state from the interior components that you're displaying. Okay, so then down here, we simply render our stat bar and the question component, and then we have this dynamic render here. So if we're waiting to advance, we're going to display this button, which we could have put in a component as well if we wanted to. Okay, now we go down to let's go with the stat bar. And the stat bar, very simple. We're just displaying the 3 pieces of information that we need in a separate component. We have reset, again, pretty straightforward. We have a button. When you press the button, it's going to call the function from the prop, reset everything. We have an h1 tag, just displaying how you actually performed. Question.tsx, we display what the actual question is. We then render all of the possible choices or answers. If we go to answers, a bit more complicated. This is just because we need to know if we're displaying them as red or green text. So we go here and we do all the dynamic rendering and display each of our individual answers, either disabling them or adjusting the color when we need to. Lastly, answer simply displays the answer. And then we have kind of this style tag here so that we know if we're doing it red, green, or whatever color we pass in. Okay, so I think, guys, that is going to wrap it up. I hope you found value in this video, and especially with this tool. Codux is really cool. Again, I know they're the sponsor of this video, but I had a really fun time messing around with this, and especially once you get into larger projects, it's really useful to be able to kind of A/B test your components, have multiple boards for them, see how they look in different states, and even kind of inject them and move them around in the project. A few features I didn't show you right away was that we can actually add components in here. So you see there's this little add button, and there's all these components I could actually just directly add into the editor, right? So I can actually create the JSX or the structure of my UI using this graphical tool if I decided to do that. For me, probably not something I'll do because I'd rather code it out. But for anyone who's more of a designer, you can make a component, make a version of that component as one of the boards, and then you can actually move it around. So you can see we have our red button, our green button. We have all the different components here rendered that we could actually just take and kind of drag in and move where we want them to be in a specific board. So really useful tool, again, completely free. I hope you guys found value in it, and I'd love to hear what you think of it in the comments down below. So with that said, I'll wrap it up. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in another one.